Now, one of the questions I often get is, do you need a PI license to do forensic accounting? And of course, the answer, famously put, is always, it depends. Now, one of the things that we have to look at is when we're talking about being a private investigator, what does a private investigator do? First of all, we're licensed by the state. So we have 50 different sets of rules, well, plus the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the territory. So actually more than 50 different sets of rules for how you can become a PI. And the rules vary, for how much experience you need, whether you need to work in a PI firm. I had to work for a PI for 3 years to gain the experience I needed to strike out on my own. We need to look at reciprocity between states. We have it now with CPA, but with PIs, we don't necessarily have reciprocity. So you need to check with the state you're going into before you start an investigation. Now, many times I've heard people tell me, well, I've been doing forensic accounting for years and I don't have a PI license and I don't need it. Well, the answer is it depends. Now, if all you're doing is reviewing documents that have been given to you by the parties or through discovery, then you don't need a PI license because everything's been turned over to you. You haven't gone out and done any investigative work. So, for example, in a divorce case, if you're doing a business valuation for a divorce case, all of the information is either going to be voluntarily given to you or provided through discovery. You're not going to go out and dig up the stuff on your own. However, if you're working in a workers' compensation fraud case, and I've done, when you're doing those, you may go out and film the person who claims to be too injured to go to work. And in some cases, we've caught them running marathons, re-roofing their homes, jumping ski jets out on the lake, and doing various other activities which basically prove that they are, perfectly capable of working. Then you need a PI license. If you're searching for assets, maybe hidden assets in a divorce case, or you have a judgment and you're trying to seize assets in order to satisfy the judgment, and you have to go out and do the work. Or, one of the big areas I've gotten involved in is actually working in estate cases. And it's not because people hide things, it's because mom and dad pass away and they never bothered to complete a will or list all their assets. And now we got to go out and find out what did they own so that the stuff can be passed on to their heirs. So again, you need to look state by state because some states require licensing, some states don't. Some states give exceptions for CPAs who are doing accounting work. So if your only investigation is looking at financial statements and accounting transactions, in those states you don't need a separate license. But always check, because the question is, what could go wrong if you don't have one? Well, number one, you could face civil and criminal penalties for operating without a license or conducting an investigation without a license. California actually has a special unit called the Unlicensed Activity Unit, and it's part of their Bureau of Security and Investigative Services, and their sole mission is to punish individuals and firms who are conducting investigations without proper licensing. And I always get, well, who's going to turn me in? Well, you're dealing with litigation. If you're doing a fraud examination, the suspect is going to turn you in because they can file an anonymous report. They're able to go out there and report you without having any issues on themselves. And of course, they want to stop your investigation. So reporting you can slow up and stop your investigation. We could also see a motion to exclude your testimony at trial. You gather all the evidence and then it's inadmissible. Trust me when I tell you, your client isn't going to be happy that they paid all those fees and now you're not allowed to testify because you broke the law. And you could face sanctions and loss of your CPA or other professional licenses because now you have a crime of moral turpitude. Okay. Now, when we're looking at that, as I said, in a lot of states now, you can report unlicensed activity simply by completing a form on the internet, and you can also do it anonymously. They don't even have to tell you who's reporting for you. And just to give you an idea of some of the penalties, in Michigan, it's a felony where you can go to jail for 4 years and face a $5,000 fine. Now, in Indiana, it's only a misdemeanor, so you can only go to jail for up to 12 months, but you have to give back all of the compensation you received while performing unlicensed activity. So all the money you were paid goes back to the client. One thing we want to be aware of when we're doing a forensic accounting investigation, or any type of investigation for that matter, is the concept of pretexting, or pretending to be an individual in order to locate financial assets, obtain bank balances, find bank accounts or retirement accounts or other things. I mean, I go back into the 70s, and when we were searching for stuff, we'd call the bank pretending to be the account holder, asking for the account number, and they'd give it to us over the phone. In today's world, that's illegal. It was actually outlawed by the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999. Now, one of the things we want to consider when we're doing forensic accounting is the standards and the professional standards we have to follow. The AICPA has the statements and standards for consulting services. And a consulting service is any service you perform where you hold yourself out or your client knows you're a CPA, where you use your knowledge, training, experience, or education for the benefit of the client in exchange for compensation that's not covered by any of the other standards. So basically speaking is, if there's no other standard out there, then the statements on standards of consulting services are going to apply if you're a CPA. The AICPA also has the statements and standards for valuations, and we also have new standards that are being developed for forensic accounting engagements that are going to go into effect in May of this year. If you're going to do a fraud examination, you may need to know the ACFE standards. And if you're going to do a valuation or fraud examination, you should also understand the NACVA standards and the various state laws that are in place that you need to know when you're dealing with doing investigative work or reporting work or being an expert witness in a court case. All right, now the proposed for professional standards for the AICPA, and this is the statement on standards for forensic services. This will apply to anyone that's doing a litigation or an investigative engagement. All right, now, big thing, no contingent fees as an expert in litigation. So if you're going to be an expert in litigation, you can't accept a contingent fee. You have to have a flat fee or an hourly fee, but it cannot be contingent on the outcome of the case. I think we all understand how that would be perceived by the judge and jury. Again, no opinions on guilt or innocence in fraud cases. That's up to the jury to decide. And these are tentatively set to go into effect May 1st, but they're still taking comments on it, so there may be some changes prior to May 1st of 2019. Now, when we're doing forensic accounting, some of the services we do, as I've mentioned, business valuations, we're looking at performing and determining the valuation of a business. Could be for a divorce case, for tax issues, or for an estate after somebody's passed away, or the purchase or sale of the business. The buyer or seller want to be able to determine what the value of the business is. A business calculation is less extensive than a business valuation. We use an agreed upon methodology. Many times this is used for the sale of a business or adding or paying out a partnership or buying out a partner. And the business calculation methodology is agreed upon in the partnership contract. But remember, a business calculation cannot be presented in court. You have to do a full valuation if you want to testify in court. Economic damage calculations. This is one of the easiest ways to get into the forensic accounting field. There's a lot of personal injury lawyers out there looking for people to testify on economic damages. And of course, fraud examinations. We're looking to determine if fraud has occurred, will occur in the future, or maybe currently working on or has occurred in the past.